Barefaced lies. The battle over Brexit heats up between Johnson and Starmer. Boris Johnson says millions of people went to the polls believing Brexit was safe under Labour, but it's clear Sir Keir Starmer was taking them for fools. In yet another fierce political exchange that underscores the lasting divisiveness of Brexit, Boris Johnson has launched a scathing attack on Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, accusing him of barefaced lies and suggesting that Starmer's EU strategy treats the British public like fools. Johnson's remarks are the latest salvo in an ongoing war of words between the two political heavyweights, reflecting broader struggles over the United Kingdom's future relationship with the European Union. This controversy brings to the surface deep political and ideological divides, not only within Westminster but across the country. It raises questions about the promises and realities of Brexit, the economic challenges that have followed the UK's departure from the EU, and the competing visions of how Britain should navigate its post-Brexit future. Boris Johnson has accused Sir Keir Starmer of deceiving Britons that Brexit is secure amid reports the Labour government has set up a surrender squad charged with hauling the UK back into the EU's orbit. The former Prime Minister accused Sir Keir of telling voters bare-faced lies at the general election in July when the Labour leader vowed there would be no going back on Brexit. Sir Keir pledged the UK under Labour would not return to the single market, customs union or free movement for EU nationals. Mr. Johnson, writing for his Mail column, suggested Brits may have been mad to believe Sir Keir, but they still gave the benefit of the doubt. The attack came after the Mail on Sunday reported there is a large team inside the Cabinet Office charged with negotiating Starmer's reset with the EU. They have been dubbed Sir Keir's surrender squad. Talks are due to start in February, with the Times reporting on Saturday that a blueprint document of Brussels' demands includes access to UK waters for EU fishermen, the effective dismantling of Britain's marine protections policy and a youth mobility scheme for European Union nationals. The document also says Britain will have to agree all new EU laws on food and agriculture would be dragged onto the UK's statute books and for Britain to submit to ECJ rulings over EU law, Mr. Johnson argues. However, that forfeiting control over agriculture would mean losing much of London's freedom to pursue good free trade deals. He then pointed to France and Germany's shrinking economies and the rise of the far right as proof the EU isn't working. Asking, what the hell is Starmer actually trying to achieve in lashing this economy closer to the EU, at the very moment when the EU model is so manifestly failing? The former Prime Minister concluded that above all Sir Keir has no mandate to set up the Whitehall surrender squad or for the talks, any more than he had a mandate for tax rises announced in the budget. Mr. Johnson accused the PM of lying about both and Labour of taking power by deception. He added, we must of course respect the law and the Constitution. But I call on everyone who cares about democracy and the economic salvation of this country to fight again for the freedoms the people voted for in 2016 and which they believed were secure. Keir Starmer has been walking a tightrope since becoming leader of the Labour Party, particularly when it comes to Brexit. A former supporter of remaining in the EU, Starmer has sought to distance himself from any suggestion that Labour would attempt to rejoin the Union. His strategy has been framed as pragmatic and future-focused. Rather than reopening debates about membership, he has promised to make Brexit work. This involves improving trade relations, reducing bureaucracy for businesses, and restoring. In recent weeks, Starmer has hinted at pursuing a closer trading relationship with the EU, potentially addressing some of the economic barriers created by the UK's departure. However, he has categorically ruled out rejoining the EU, the customs union, or the single market, positions that aim to reassure Leave voters who may still view Labour with suspicion. Despite these assurances, Johnson and other prominent Conservatives have seized upon Starmer's remarks as evidence of a secret agenda to reverse Brexit. Johnson has characterized Labour's approach as a betrayal of the referendum result and has accused Starmer of plotting to drag the UK back under Brussels' influence through what he calls stealth re-entry. Johnson's counterattack, Brexit as sacred ground. For Boris Johnson, Brexit is not just a policy achievement, it's a political identity and a legacy he is determined to defend. As the face of the Leave campaign in 2016 and the Prime Minister who got Brexit done, Johnson remains deeply invested in ensuring that the UK's departure from the EU is seen as a success. Any attempt to revisit or soften Brexit is therefore framed as an existential threat, not just to Brexit itself, but to Johnson's political legacy. In his latest attack, Johnson accused Starmer of attempting to deceive the public with vague and misleading promises about improving relations with the EU without compromising Brexit's core principles. Speaking to supporters, Johnson said, Starmer is taking us for fools. He's pretending he can have it both ways, closer ties with the EU while keeping Brexit intact. These are barefaced lies. Johnson's comments reflect a broader conservative narrative that any effort to improve ties with the EU is a slippery slope toward reversing Brexit. This narrative has been a cornerstone of Tory strategy, particularly in constituencies that strongly backed Leave in 2016. By portraying Starmer as untrustworthy and out of touch with voters' Brexit priorities, Johnson A. The broader context, Brexit's economic fallout. The backdrop to this debate is the economic reality of post-Brexit Britain. Since leaving the EU, the UK has faced significant challenges, including disrupted supply chains, labour shortages, and declining trade volumes with its largest trading partner. While some of these issues have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic and global economic conditions, there is widespread agreement among economists that Brexit has created additional barriers to growth. A recent report by the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, estimated that Brexit would reduce the UK's long-term GDP by about 4%. Business groups have repeatedly called for a reduction in red tape and friction at the UK-EU border, which they say has made it harder to export goods and services. Farmers, manufacturers, and small businesses have been particularly vocal about the need for more practical solutions to post-Brexit challenges. In this context, Starmer's calls for closer cooperation with the EU may resonate with voters who are frustrated by the economic consequences of Brexit. However, they also risk alienating Leave supporters who view any attempt to engage more closely with Brussels as a betrayal of the referendum result. A divided electorate. The challenges for Starmer and Labour. Starmer's position reflects a calculated effort to appeal to a broad cross-section of voters. On one hand, he must win back traditional Labour voters in Leave-supporting areas who abandoned the party in the 2019 general election, many of whom remain sceptical of Labour's stance on Brexit. On the other hand, he cannot afford to alienate pro-Remain voters, particularly in metropolitan areas, who expect Labour to champion a closer relationship with the EU. This balancing act has defined much of Starmer's leadership. While he has been careful to avoid calling for a second referendum or reopening the question of EU membership, his commitment to fixing Brexit suggests a willingness. The Conservative strategy, rallying the base. For the Conservatives, the Brexit debate remains a potent political weapon. Johnson's attack on Starmer is not just about defending Brexit, it's about energizing the Tory base and distracting from the government's own struggles. With the party facing declining poll numbers, internal divisions, and economic challenges, reigniting the Brexit debate offers a way to unify supporters and shift the focus onto Labour's perceived weaknesses. Johnson's rhetoric also reflects a broader strategy of portraying Labour as elitist and out of touch with ordinary voters. By framing Starmer's EU plans as dishonest and out of step with public opinion, the Conservatives hope to rekindle the populist sentiment that propelled them to victory in 2019. Looking ahead, the future of the UK-EU relationship. The debate over Starmer's EU plans and Johnson's response highlights the enduring challenges of Brexit. Nearly 4 years after the UK formally left the EU, questions about trade, regulation, and international cooperation remain deeply contested. While most voters may not want to revisit the Brexit referendum, there is growing recognition that the UK's relationship with the EU will continue to evolve. For Starmer, the key challenge is to articulate a clear and credible vision for this relationship that addresses the economic realities of Brexit while respecting the democratic mandate of the 2016 referendum. For Johnson and the Conservatives, the goal is to maintain Brexit as a rallying cry and to prevent Labour from gaining the upper hand on an issue that remains deeply symbolic. As the next general election approaches, the battle over Brexit's legacy and the UK's future direction will likely remain a central theme. Both parties must navigate a complex and divided electorate, balancing the demands of pragmatism and principle in a debate that continues to shape British politics.